Good morning.
Here we are.
We're here.
What a week.
I think this week has been 3 months long.
It kind of feels that way.
Yeah, no, it really has. Have you been keeping up with the impeachment news, or do you feel like...
Just when I feel like I am, something else like zigs or zags.
In the beginning, it felt like it was of really large importance to keep up with it because it was like coming really fast and it was sort of unbelievable that it was like finally happening. And now I just feel like, I have other things to do.
Yeah,
I can't be following this all the time, which is why we have XRAY in the morning to fill you in.
Yeah, I mean, we were mentioning earlier, like the New York Times is now doing a daily impeachment update email because things are moving so fast. And sort of as it started to break this time, well, a week and a half ago, it was Wednesday when you were talking about all of this breaking. There was definitely intention to move this quickly. Thoroughly yet quickly, but I don't think anyone had a sense of the pace of this, and also probably how much Trump is influencing the speed of this when he's standing in front of Navy One saying, oh, well, you know, Ukraine should be looking into the Bidens, as should China. So, you know, now we're all secondhand witnesses to this. Should we all be filing whistleblower complaints at this point?
I think what's interesting to me is that I felt like initially this was very boring from a like as far as like what they've got him on, you know, like it doesn't have, it's not that salacious because I think in the end a lot of people don't care about foreign interference in American elections because they believe they're all rigged anyway, right? So I think I've been really surprised at how quickly the numbers have changed.
Yeah.
I ran an extremely unofficial poll on my Twitter of my extremely biased Twitter followers. But I asked folks their age, if they had a landline, and whether or not they supported Trump's job performance. Because one thing I've been really staggered at is some of the polls that are coming out are showing as much as 70% of Americans no longer approve of Trump's job performance. And that has, I mean, that's shifted by 30 points in the past week. And one thing that I think is really interesting is knowing how these political surveys operate. Mm-hmm. They're still entirely reliant on landlines. I guess confirming what I suspected. One, I don't have a single Twitter follower that approves of Trump's job performance. I don't know why that's true. And then additionally, the only people that had landlines were over the age of 50, pretty much. Like we had no one in my age bracket or younger or even in their 40s that had a landline. I had one person was like, I kind of have a landline. I have this voice over IP thing that then redirects to my phone wherever I'm in the world. And I was like, that is the definition of not a landline.
Right.
But that's like the millennial version of a landline.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's important to not only to talk about the differences between supporting an impeachment inquiry versus supporting impeachment.
Yeah.
I mean, folks are supporting impeachment. Like this, what has happened in the last week is enough for them to put through articles of impeachment for Trump.
Well, and there'd been so much pressure when, you know, they really tried to weave this when this came out last week. The Republicans tried to weave this as though it was going to be a hey, you're ruining your chances of winning the presidential election. You're going to kill, you know, everybody in these swing congressional districts with this impeachment inquiry. And I think that hasn't proven to be true because I think it's very much affecting President Trump's chances, even in the very small. I think there's still a small likelihood that he gets removed from office. I think it's going to be hard to get this through the Senate, but this is really affecting his numbers in ways that I didn't expect, at least.
Another interesting aspect of the polling that I have seen, Crooked Media did their own poll with a polling firm, and the number of people who are aware of the Ukraine situation is fascinating to me. So we were talking about just sort of how much news is coming at us, but the awareness, the poll that they did was like 80% of folks who were polled were aware of the situation, which I also think is interesting. So one of the pieces, as impeachment had been sort of volleyed back and forth over the last several months was, can people pay attention to it? Do they care? And the impact that it will have on sentiment once it does saturate the news feed. And I think we're seeing that now that it's everywhere, with daily minute-to-minute updates that folks are aware, and sentiment is shifting significantly.
I think one thing that I find interesting about this is the season in which we would be getting mired in the Democratic primary election coverage. You know, how well do they eat a hot dog in whatever random county fair in Iowa? And we're just not seeing that kind of things. And I think it's bad news for folks that are still looking for name recognition, right? I still am. You'd have to press me real hard to name all of the candidates in, right? And 80% of Americans are aware of Trump, Ukraine, which is notable. But I bet 80% of Americans couldn't name 6 of the, contenders for the Democratic primary. And I think that for folks that were aiming for more name recognition at this point on the campaign trail, it's probably bad for them. That being said,
they're not going to break through the news cycle.
Campaign coverage a year out from the election is the most boring campaign coverage in the world, and I'm kind of happy to have
a little break.
I'm not happy to have foreign interference in our elections. I am happy to see Trump maybe digging his own grave, and simultaneously to have a little break to because it started in what, May, and it's a long way to
time
go.
Till February 3rd in that Iowa caucus. There is still lots of action, of course, on the 2020 front. Just this week, there was on Wednesday, there was a Preventing Gun Violence Forum, another 10-hour town hall. Each of 10 candidates got 30 minutes. We also know that on Wednesday, Bernie Sanders took a pause in his campaign due to some chest pain at an event Tuesday night. He had 2 stents put in. He is healing. There is news that he will be joining the next Democratic debate, which is a week from Tuesday. So that's good news. They had pulled his Iowa ad. So the headline on Wednesday was that he was pulling Iowa ad buys. To me, which is like, oh my gosh, is he suspending his campaign?
Yeah.
But I was talking to someone who is helping with some of the marketing and advertising on the Sanders campaign, and they said, the fact of the matter is they were pulling event ads. He had canceled all his events. So that was totally misleading. That was the big headline on Wednesday. He's pulling all his Iowa ad buys. It was just Iowa events, which is online and television ads and radio ads and all that. So it wasn't by any means suspending his campaign.
Okay.
He had one of the largest fundraising hauls of any Democratic candidate, and those numbers haven't come out yet for Warren, I don't believe, but Sanders had a big haul for that quarter, so I don't think he's going anywhere, unless his health tells him otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think shortly after waking up from surgery, was tweeting again about how this is why we need Medicare for all. So I gotta say, he sticks to his narrative. He sticks to his message, no matter what.
And I think it's good. We've got so much. We'll continue to follow all of the impeachment news, but there are so many cabinet and administration officials implicated in this.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a done deal that if Trump is impeached and removed from office, that Pence is going to just jump right in, because he's involved in all this as well. Secretary of State, Attorney General.
Seeing Trump throw Pence under the bus the way that he has is very fascinating to me, because as someone who Trump has emphasized how much he cares about loyalty, and how implicitly important he feels that loyalty is above all else. Yet at the same time, I feel like he's not thinking several steps down the line the way you need to in one of these sort of things. I mean, does he ever? But it is interesting to see him essentially throwing Pence under the bus so early in the game, right? I kind of expected that to be more of a last-ditch effort. So
absolutely. And last night, so in the impeachment briefing that came from the New York Times, and it comes out about 5:00. So the one that came out yesterday, there was an interesting back and forth with Maggie Haberman, who is a New York Times reporter and has followed Trump for many years. And one of the questions that was asked of her is, how is it that, maybe it was the other day, but one of the questions that was asked of Oh, yeah, no, it was last night. Why would he just blurt out that he wants China to investigate the Bidens? And Maggie Haberman says, he clearly knows something a wise person once said to me, which is that the value of a secret is its ability to be disclosed. So he tries to move the window of acceptability by publicly doing the very thing he's accused of doing in private. And then just also talked about sort of his circumstances, like how does he not get it? How does he not understand that he's under investigation for telling the Ukraine to investigate Biden, and then he does it about China in front of all the news cameras?
So the reason he does this is because he has never had consequences in his life stick to him. Yeah. And so to him, he doesn't view any of this as consequences. He views everything as a matter of PR, right? And that is, PR is something he's good at. I mean, yelling at reporters aside, he knows how to spin a story. He knows how to dominate the media cycle. That's been the only thing he's really been good at in his entire career, even before his political career. What he's good at is selling his name and this vision, not necessarily actually, running buildings, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that he kind of refuses to believe that this is anything but a PR. Like I don't think he sees any teeth behind this. He also, we know from what we've heard from current and former advisors that when he hears something, if he likes it, if it fits the narrative he wants, he will stick to it. And so it's very possible at some point someone said something to him like, oh, because the Senate has to approve this, it's very unlikely you'll get removed from office. And so he views this whole thing as a charade. Like, that someone probably made some passing comment or gave him very real numbers about, what this looks like, because it is kind of uncharted territory. And he picked out the part that he wanted, and then he's holding on to that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Probably believes that if he says it enough times, it will be true, right?
Yeah, Maggie, the interviewer to Maggie Haberman said, does this time frame remind you of anything? And she said the period of time that is most illuminating happened after the Access Hollywood tape. So the next day, she wrote a story about Mr. Trump. He was in Trump Tower, but then he came downstairs sometime after 4, immersed himself in a crowd of supporters who were outside in the street, pumped his fist. The next day, he went to the debate in St. Louis and paraded Bill Clinton's accusers in front of Hillary Clinton. Remember when he had them? I'd totally forgotten about that.
Yep.
And she said it was the most savage thing I'd ever seen anyone do in politics. Crazy. This morning, Jon Favreau had retweeted. He is a former Obama staffer, had retweeted that a Republican senator, Senator John Cornyn, tweeted that now the Trump Justice Department is investigating foreign government influence, VP Biden conflicts of interest, and possible corruption. So this is a Republican senator saying that now not only has Trump said China should investigate Joe Biden and Ukraine should investigate Joe Biden, it's possible that the Justice Department has also been directed to investigate Joe Biden.
Yeah. So should we talk a little about the news?
Absolutely.
I guess, should we lead into the top story, which we've been discussing at this point for 20 minutes? Our top story is Trump again asked Ukraine to investigate the Bidens and also invited China to do the same. I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth. On Thursday, during a White House lawn press briefing, Trump requested that both China and Ukraine investigate the conduct of the Bidens. We have a clip here. Trump and his team had offered no evidence to back his corruption accusations against Joe Biden. In a publicly requested assistance of 2 foreign powers to dig up dirt on his political rival, Trump appears to have again engaged in the same conduct for which he currently faces an impeachment investigation. Trump's request to China was especially striking because of the current trade war. The U.S. and China are due to hold talks next week. In a statement, Biden's campaign manager said Trump was, quote, desperately clutching for conspiracy theories that have been debunked. She said, quote, now with his administration in free fall, Donald Trump is flailing and melting down on national television. And Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen asked Republicans to turn their allegiance from Trump and back to the U.S. He said, quote, Russia, Ukraine, China, how far will Trump really go to sell out America's sovereignty to stay in office? We already know Russia will go after our democracy again. Have my Republican colleagues really not seen enough of Trump's shameful, illegal behavior? What will it take?
Should we take a quick break and then come back with more?
Yes.
Let's do it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you. You're here with Emily and Lillian, and this is X-Ray in the Morning, where our radio is yours.